Hello, and thank you for joining us for Conquer Your Career Entrepreneurship. My name is Crystal Brooks, and I'm Director for College and Pre-MBA Programs for the Forte Foundation. And I am delighted today to be joined by two MBA alumni who are entrepreneurs, who have tackled this challenge of starting their own businesses, and they're going to share some of their insights and experiences with you today. So Dory, Linda, thank you so much. I'd love to turn it to each of you to introduce yourself. So first, let's start with Dory Golkin-Smith of Mercer.
Hi, everybody. It is nice to meet you. I'm excited to be here. I was actually introduced to Forte in my pre-MBA life. I was a consultant at Deloitte, one of your sponsors. So I was really excited to connect with you all again once I started of Mercer. So my background, again, worked at Deloitte Consulting. Was part of the GSAT program there, where they sponsored us to go back to school with the intention of coming back to consulting afterwards. And to be honest, and I was very transparent about this, I wasn't sure I was going to come back. I had kind of the entrepreneurship bug. I wasn't sure if I wanted to start a company or if I wanted to join another startup, but I felt like something smaller was in my future. So I went to Wharton MBA and started exploring that. And I met my now co-founder, Emmeline, whose background was in finance issues and private equity before coming to, and both struggled a lot to find that fit our needs as professional women. So we had options like Siri and Ann Taylor, but nothing that we thought was kind of the right price point and the right quality. We didn't want to break the bank and buy designer clothes, but we also knew we deserved better than, you know, kind of cheap things that were manufactured overseas and would fall apart after a season. So at Wharton, we worked on the startup for both years, but primarily during the summer between the 2 years, and launched it November 13 after we graduated. I think that kind of answers any questions, just a little bit of personal stuff for me or I'll close it actually here. So I'm happy to be back home, and I just had a baby boy. So if you hear crying in the background, that is me.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Dory, for that introduction, and we certainly will forgive any cries out as we're on our call today. Linda Peralta, I'd love to turn it to you now of the Pocket Palette. Would you please introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I am the founder of the Pocket Palette, which is a single-use full-face makeup kit. The kit is about the size of a Post-it note and definitely thinner than a Post-it note pack. And the idea is that you can have a single serving of BB cream, mascara, and a dual-purpose lip and cheek color at your disposal, so that when you're running between MBA interviews and classes and work and gym, that you don't have to carry your entire makeup bag around. So that's me, that's the product. I launched it right after graduation. I started working on it my second year at GW. And I launched right after graduation, so officially I incorporated the business in that August. But before I did that, I actually had different experience. I started, my first job out of undergrad was to be assistant store manager at a Target store in LA. So I did that for a few years, and then I decided to switch it up and work as operations manager for a public charter school in DC. And so I loved DC when I came here, so I decided to go to GW, but full-time, because I knew that long-term, I knew that entrepreneurship was going to be something for me, but I didn't know in what way. So I just wanted to get as much varied experience as I could so that I can then transfer it. But yeah, so right after graduation, so I actually launched the Pocket Palette as part of the student new venture competition. And so I did that. I got 4th place for the official one, and then I applied to a bunch of other local competitions. I won a bunch of those there. But going through that competition process is really what gave me not the confidence, I guess the proof of concept that I needed to make sure that this is something that I could do full time. And so it was totally scary when all of my friends are getting like $125,000 jobs, and I decided to go negative to have negative income and then start this. But we are we're expecting our first production at the beginning of May. So that's really exciting. And yeah, so outside of entrepreneurship, things that make, so I live in DC now, we're homeowners, so I'm trying to, be very Pinteresting and trying to design pretty corners of the house, but it doesn't work out very well because I lose patience. So that's me at home. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Well, it's really interesting to have you both on the call today, Dory and Linda, because of course you are at different experiences and different companies and different levels of where you are in your businesses and launching those and kind of having really varied experiences. So I'm excited to learn from both of you today. I'm wondering if we can start with you, Dory, to talk a little bit about what really drove your interest in business and entrepreneurship. You mentioned when you were at Deloitte that you already thought you might have that entrepreneurial bug. Can you talk a little bit more about that and then ultimately how you made the decision to really jump in with both feet?
Yeah, for sure. So consulting, I'm guessing a bunch of people on this call are in consulting or thinking about consulting. I think it's one of the very, very best ways to be trained. You learn so much so quickly. Every project your staff on is completely different, so you have these like incredibly fast ramp-ups. And I couldn't have asked for a better job out of undergraduate. But what I struggled with personally was that I was two things. One, that I was never working for myself or my own company. So obviously Deloitte is a service provider, and I struggled that we didn't, that was our product. And like people were our product, and I get the value in that, but I struggled that like Deloitte didn't have something it was creating and that I was constantly working towards. I was working for other people, other companies, and not necessarily people I would have opted to work with or for. So that was my first struggle. And the that I was constantly changing who I was working for. Like I liked the idea of really dedicating myself to one thing and working on it for, an extended period of time. I feel shorter, more intensive projects when I was at Deloitte, so a lot of them were 6 to 8 weeks, and I had the experience of really working towards something for a year or 2 or 3 or 10. And then, so when we were working on this at Wharton, both Emily and I were in the same position, and we were very open with each other about, when we were making this go, no-go decision, whether or not we were going to look for jobs or take jobs after we graduated from Wharton. And the way we decided that, we did a beta launch of our products while we were at Wharton. So we put out a list of tests in the market, and by the market I mean the 1,000 women that were on campus. And that was really just, just a little bit more, but in business school, you're so focused on surveys and focused on getting people to want there from under their mouth. We production sold dresses. That was for us the proof of concept that people actually wanted to buy the dresses, and that we were hitting a need in the marketplace. And we got a lot of feedback from that. So with these size dresses, we got feedback. The price point should be what the fabric should be, the length, the color, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of that, we deemed it an undeniable success. So Emily and I said, okay, let's do it. And 4 years later, still going.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Dory. Linda, did you have a similar experience? I know you mentioned you worked at Target, then in charter schools, you went into your MBA. Talk a little bit about how you made that decision, and then, how you then also made that very scary decision that you mentioned to really not follow that traditional career path post-MBA, but to really launch your business.
Yeah, to clarify to how I made the decision to go to business school from those career paths, is that what I got? And then entrepreneurship?
Sure, yeah, that would be great. I'd love to hear a little bit about both of those things.
Okay, yeah, so I was weird. I knew that I wanted to go to business school, like, even before I graduated from undergrad. And so I was very methodical in how I did things. I saw that the average work experience for the type of school that I was looking at was about 4 to 5 years. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself 4 years to learn as much as I can in whatever jobs that I take, so then I can apply to business school. So I had, like, premeditated business school, and so that's what got me involved with the Forte MBA launch program. So my experience with entrepreneurship is I've always known that I wanted to do it full-time, but similarly, I was looking at the end term, like, what are the skills that I'm going to need to become an entrepreneur? I'm going to need to learn, like, running all different parts of the business, but then I also thought that I would have to have more niche experience. So all of my experience has been in essentially general management. And so I thought that going into the MBA, my plan, which is actually in my admissions essay, was to work for a few years doing brand management or consulting and marketing, like, in that very niche space. And I thought that I wanted to do consumer goods because that's what I had worked at Target, and I actually liked it. So that was my goal, to actually get a associate brand manager position at a place like P&G or one of the candy companies. So that was what I thought I had to do in order to make that that switch. But like I mentioned, going through the new venture competition at school, and I'm sure that every business school has a similar one, really made me think about, like, what is the product that I have? Who's going to buy it? How can I prove that they're going to buy it? And so just going through, like Dory said, that process of validating your market. By the time I was halfway through the competition, I got a little nervous because I was like, oh wow, this is actually a business that I could do for real. So that's kind of how I landed with Pocket Palette. The idea for Pocket Palette actually came to me, like, it was just out of a need, right? Like Dory said, that this was born out of a need. I had thought about it, like, years before, in 2013, and it was one of those New York, DC to New York trips, like a 5 a.m. train, and if you're landing in New York at 7 a.m., you have to look nice and presentable, but I also didn't want to have to wake up any earlier just to do my makeup. So I ended up just making the first Pocket Palette out of a sandwich bag. And that's how I was able to do my makeup on the train / on the go, but then I didn't have to carry all my makeup with me. So that's how idea came for it. And then I didn't think that it was an idea that, I didn't think that other people would find that carrying makeup was such a problem that they would want something like this. But yeah, so long term, that's how I ended up testing the idea through the competition. Came to decide to do it full time. It was just an honest conversation that I had to have with myself and with my husband, and really with my parents too, because they were expecting me to get a job. So it was a big conversation. It was a big honest truth, but the way I justified it to myself was, at this point, I'm fresh out of business school. I could ride essentially the wave of momentum that I had into my first production run. So that's how I decided to do entrepreneurship full time. And the way that I further validated that idea we launched a Kickstarter in October. And so my thought was, if the Kickstarter is successful, that means that people are, outside of my GW and DC community are willing to buy this. And that was going to be like my final validation. And it worked. So here I am.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Linda. I'd love to now explore a little bit about the MBA and how that's been valuable to both of you. And maybe, Linda, I'll start with you. You mentioned that it was a tough decision and you really had to decide what to do to really get this started and to take this leap of faith. But of course, an MBA is not prerequisite when you're thinking about being an entrepreneur. So how is an MBA helpful to you in really getting this started? Can you share a little bit about what you've taken from your education into the beginnings of your business?
Yeah, so definitely, I'll take the answer in two parts. So like one, academically, the courses that you have to take and the researches that you have to do and like to fulfill whatever assignment, right? That was obviously useful, but I think of the value of the MBA more in terms of outside of the straight academic class. So it's working with teams, it's talking to people who, have different languages than you. It's using the full resources of the university behind it. So the MBA was totally crucial in that sense because, like, I decided to become an entrepreneur because of the support that I received at GW. And so I think that had I just decided to do things on my own, I feel like I probably could have done it still, but it would have been taken a lot longer and would have been a lot harder. But the best thing that I take about it are that my classmates were so excited for me as well. So they kind of felt like, even at graduation, they're like, oh, we are so excited for when we launch Pocket Palette. And so like all 90 of my classmates felt that way. And that was really good, so that I felt supported by that community as well. And also it's really nice when you have an idea, your friends can help you do research too. So for example, for a pricing class that one of my good friends was taking, she asked if she can model their pricing models around Pocket Palette. And I was like, absolutely, if you want to do free work for me and get a grade for it, like, that's great. So that happened to me in a few different ways. So that was actually like a nice bonus. But definitely the true value of the MBA is with the connections that you make and the thinking skills that you are forced to learn, thinking critically and really testing your market. That's where I think it would come down to.
Thanks, Linda. Jory, what about you? Did you have a similar experience? And now you're 4 years out, and you can think back about really what this MBA meant for you thus far on your entrepreneurial journey. How was it valuable?
Yeah, I mean, I agree exactly with what Linda said, and it's quite similar to what I was thinking. I think one thing that is really cool about working on a startup while you're taking classes is exactly what Linda said, is that you can actually apply the concepts that you're learning to what you're working on. So I know a lot of times classes are kind of hypothetical. It's like, let's talk about supply chain, and here's how you optimize, Subway sandwiches supply chain, or you're talking about hiring practices, or give their hiring practices. Like, it's so ambiguous and kind of not relevant to anyone in the class, especially people who are not planning on doing, that it was nice to be able to apply the thinking to what we were working on. So, someone could say, like, oh, here's how you optimize this, and you raise your hand and say, okay, well, you're going to be producing 1,000 units by producing 1,000. And you kind of, like Linda said, the class likes it better because it's an applied concept. The professors like it more because they actually are answering a specific question rather than talking about a case that they've taught a million times. So I thought that was pretty cool, for sure. I think, and then anything that worked out. So I look at kind of who went to my undergrad and grad schools to see who we can partner with and who can help us with different things and who I can help with different things, and ways that, you know, I can get back to other people entrepreneurs. So it's definitely about making connections and then maintaining true relationships with those people, not just like handing your business card over, but catching up with people regularly, and, you know, down the line, everyone can help each other out.
That's great. Thanks, Dory. Maybe sticking with you for the next question here, Dory, I'd love to learn a little bit about what your challenges have been thus far in these 4 years that you've been working in this business of Mercer. What have been some of the biggest successes as an entrepreneur, and what have been some of the biggest challenges?
I say that the biggest challenge with being an entrepreneur is that there's no path that you're on. So there's not, you know, the way that, you know, in consulting or finance or something else, you are a consultant, and then you're a manager, and the senior manager, and then your partner. There's like a path, and there are years associated with it, and pay associated with it, and expectations and associated with it. That is far, far, far from the truth with entrepreneurship. And as a lot of you probably are, as I was, I like to kind of plan things, and you absolutely not. And you kind of make decisions as you go. So, you know, one big thing is, you know, are you raising institutional funding? Yes, no. And if you go down the no path, the path is very different than you went down the yes path, in good ways and bad ways. If you are, you know, for us, we manufacture in China, or do we manufacture in New York, and then it looks very different. You kind of can't make all those 1,000 decisions at once. So you make one decision at a time and then end up somewhere, which is really, so I'll give you an example. We never, you know, if I look back at kind of what we wrote as our business plan from the get-go, we were years behind the Word guys at Wharton, and like that direct to consumer is everything. Retail, e-commerce only, direct to consumer, and that's what we were going to do 100%. And now we actually have a decent wholesale business, and it's not that we're selling to Saks Fifth Avenue or Macy's. We're selling to companies like Stitch Fix and Rent the Runway and Gwenny B, which is a great plus-size rental company. And that was something that we were so against at the beginning. And they're amazing partnerships. It's you know, very synergistic for both us and them, and it's something that I'm really excited about, these partnerships. And if you had asked me 4 years ago if we'd ever do wholesale, I would kind of like laugh in your face and say absolutely not. But that, you know, as long as you kind of take every decision one at a time, you end up getting to the right place. But that can be really stressful. I feel like that was a very broad challenge that I faced as an entrepreneur. And the successes, I mean, to be honest, it's about seeing people find out about our brand and buy stuff and love it. You know, we hear back from customers and saying that I just had a customer email me. He helped her buy something in the New York City store and as a lawyer, and she wore one of our dresses. Like, I was awesome, and it looked awesome, and then I felt really good about myself, and that feels pretty cool. So those are like a lot of those little successes. I remember we started, and our sales were like super low, and we could identify basically who everyone who was shopping with us was, you know, whether it was a friend or family or, you know, one step removed from us, where we could, you know, go on Facebook and figure out who someone was. Like, oh, that's our friend Sarah's roommate from college. I remember getting customers that we had no idea where they came from, and that was pretty, you know, I would say one of our first successes we've had. Like, we had built something that was now had a life of its own apart from us, that was growing and building a brand, and, you know, our products were proving themselves in the market.
That's great. Thank you, Dory. Linda, you're earlier on this journey, but certainly I'm sure you've run into some of these similar challenges and successes. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what has what have you faced as a challenge in getting started, and what has really reinforced you moving forward on this journey in terms of success?
Yeah, so like Dory said, most people who get their MBAs like to plan, and like I mentioned, I knew I wanted to get an MBA before I had even graduated. So I went from planning my life like 4 to 5 years at a time and taking those steps to like now, if you tell me that I can't think beyond the next maybe 3 months because financially and because of the way that our orders are working. So that is definitely like an everyday struggle, along with the other ones like finding money and are you talking to the right people? Are you networking enough? So those are all constant challenges, but the biggest one is definitely having to reassure myself to keep going. And the way that and then because it's a very woman-focused product, as I'm sure Dory can attest, like trying to talk to male investors about it, it just like makes it so difficult when they have no experience with the problem. So that's obviously a challenge too, but the constant struggle is to like say yes to myself and to make sure that we're still moving forward. But when the successes do come, the big and small ones feel really great. So our biggest one recently is that we were accepted to the Project Entrepreneur at the Runway Foundation program, and so we'll be going there, meeting with other people, and doing stuff like that is really nice when you feel that external validation about your product. But the very first time, so we launched Kickstarter, which is basically from our families, and so we raised enough money there, but those were all people that we knew. But the very first time that we got a pre-sale from somebody who had not backed the Kickstarter, who we Googled them, have no idea who they are, and they bought our product based off of like a screenshot picture, which wasn't even a real Pocket Palette. And I was so excited about this purchase, I emailed the poor woman and like said, thank you so much. And I sent her a hat that like cost me, but the whole order ended up costing me like $20. And I still don't have, the Pocket Palette to send her, but I was just so excited that this one person, this rando, like bought the Pocket Palette just the first time that she visited our website. So that successes like that are definitely what keep me going and what keep me continuing to say yes to move forward. So yeah, hopefully we'll have more of those types of successes.
I just want to jump in and talk about the female thing, because I think that is a challenge that I face, and like just want to build on that. I think, one of the biggest issues that female entrepreneurs have is that most investors are men. And Linda, we have the exact same thing, even not even funding related, but when we were talking about what we were doing, I could see people looking at me and Emma and being like, oh, wow, 2 small blonde girls who are starting a dress company. How novel. And I was just like, you don't understand the problem. And that's because they don't face it. Like, I similarly don't understand a lot of the issues that men face. So would not be the best investor or advisor for them. But I remember sitting next to a guy on a plane and was explaining the idea. I don't know how he came up. And he was like, at the end of like a 25-minute conversation, he was like, oh, I get it. So you're going to make like pinstripe pantsuits for women. And I was like, oh my Lord, like you really didn't hear a word I said. And that's so frustrating. And I think the only way that really gets better is as we, as women really get into the investing world and have more say in who gets funded and who is, building these much bigger companies. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough topic. And if anybody out there who has a woman-focused product and they're like, oh crap, now how do I go talk to male investors? One of the ways that I found around it, it takes so much more time, and especially when you're doing pitch competitions, but you have to explain the problem. For me, Pocket Palette is a solution to carrying bulky bank bags. And so because the type of men that I was speaking to didn't regularly purchase mascara and BB cream and lips and like but they had an idea. They're like, oh yeah, my wife makes me carry her makeup. I'm like, okay, great. Like this is something that I can build off of. So I would, in my pitch competitions, I would bring out my actual makeup bag and like open it on the table, and it was like a disgusting mess. And they're like, you know, kind of like, ooh, what's happening here? And but then they understood, because if you try to put it all back together and then carry it on your body, or even if you're carrying like the 3 makeup products, like they're like, oh, okay, I get that this is a problem. And then they would say like, well, why? The thing that was then stressful and explaining the pricing was like, well, a mascara tube can cost between $7 to $20, and a lipstick tube can cost between $1. And so like going through, so if you have a product out there, if you're thinking about launching your product and it's female focused, like you just have to show the problem rather than tell, because otherwise they just won't get it.
That's great advice, and certainly, you know, one of the reasons that we have webinars like this and like to expose folks to you and your great businesses is, you know, because we want to see more women entrepreneurs and eventually also more women funders and more women investors. So that's fantastic and great advice and insights from both of you there. I'd love to talk a little bit also now about tips. So you both have talked a little bit about your successes, your challenges. You're on a call here with some women that may be considering this as a career path and certainly may run into similar challenges or different challenges, different successes. I'm wondering if you can share some tips from your own experience of how to really maximize the MBA for an entrepreneurial career and how to really confidently move forward with great ideas. So Linda, perhaps we'll start with you and then head over to you, Dory.
Yeah, so if I had known that I wanted to do Pocket Palette even before I started my MBA program, I would have tailored my program to make more sense. So like how Dory mentioned, your class projects can be about your business. And the way I'll say this is, it's one of my friends who is, John, who was really interested in the travel industry. He knew that he wanted to go into the travel industry. He made all of his team projects be about the travel industry. So if it was a fake marketing concept, he built his own hotel, right? And if it was a consulting practicum, he would work with a travel agency. So he was really smart in the way that he went about doing that. And because at the end of it, you end up with all these case studies that you are doing already, but make them relevant to what you want to do. So if you have the idea, even if you have an industry, start it right away. And if you don't, because I didn't at first, then just get the experiences that you think could be most relevant, period. So, you know, financial analysis will obviously be one, but then also public speaking and general marketing. So like I would have tailored my program much better had I known this. But then the very big advice is every single business school has some sort of new venture competition, even if it's like a 2-minute pitch. Try it. It only helps you think about your business more when you're forced to present it to other people. So I would have started pitching a lot earlier than I did.
That's great. Thanks so much, Linda. Dory, what about you? Any other tips or advice for folks that are thinking about this kind of career and an MBA?
Yeah, I think my advice to any entrepreneur is to put, actually put pen to paper and get going on it. I think it's so easy for us to all get stuck in this idea world of, talking to people and getting people to say, like, that's a great idea, go for it, or, like, definitely do all the pitch competitions, but, like, that again, isn't going to prove you're going to have a successful company or not. Again, like, our business plans never got anywhere because, again, people were like, hey, they're girls making dresses. So I think as much as you can, put out kind of a minimum viable product in whatever capacity you can to get some honest, real world feedback. And that way you either know to do it or don't. Like I don't think anyone should waste their time on an idea that's not going to work. So if you can kind of put something quick and dirty out into the market, even if it's private with your friends and family or your MBA class, I would go ahead and do that so you can make a smart decision about your life. And I had a second thing, but that's kind of. Oh, and with the MBA, you have 2 years of not making money. You've already committed to that, so take advantage of that and make it so that you're setting yourself up to make money afterwards. So really, really work on your idea, your startup, your concept, so that when you leave your MBA, that you can hit the ground running and be a successful entrepreneur that is actually making revenue and hopefully able to pay yourself a little bit, rather than starting that journey right after school when you've already spent 2 years not having income. And your grades don't matter, so it's easy to get stressed about that stuff again because we're all probably a little bit type A, but focus more on kind of your career and what you want to do after.
I second the grades don't matter. I went on academic probation my first semester because I let my GPA fall before 3.0, but guess what? I still graduated, and nobody has ever asked me about my time spent in academic probation. So thank you, Dory, for saying that.
Thank you both. All right, well, I'd love to now invite any questions from the audience. So we've got 2 folks here that have this wonderful entrepreneurial experience. You can write your questions here in the Q&A box that is to the right hand of your screen, or through the chat box, also to the right hand of your screen. So I have a first question here, one that is about MBA launch and getting into the MBA launch program and kind of preparations for MBA. And I know this isn't specifically entrepreneurial focused, but I know, Linda, you participated in the MBA launch program. Would you like to talk a little bit about your experience and from a student perspective?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed my time as an MBA launcher. One, because I mean, like, the biggest reason was that it helped me build a closer relationship to Forte, because now I come back and do these types of webinars and I stay updated on their conferences and stuff. So that would be like the very biggest reason. But also, people who apply to MBA programs typically like to plan. So the launch program helped me make a plan for the year leading up to being accepted to business school. So that's what I definitely appreciated, because starting it on your own is super daunting, but having that support group there guide you through it was definitely worth my while.
That's great. Thanks, Linda. Here's a question for you, Dory. How did you first connect with investors? Were they set up connections through the MBA, people you sought out? How did you start that process of finding investors and making those connections?
Funding. So I knew the answer that my experience was kind of looking for all my
Dory, I think we're having a little bit of a connection problem with you. If I could ask you to maybe start over that answer again on connecting with investors, and we'll see if we can get a better connection this time.
Can you hear me? How's this sounding?
That sounds much better, thanks.
Okay, I will do. I have a problem with pacing when I talk. So full disclosure, of has never raised institutional funding, so I will give you, my experience as well as some of my peers' experience with getting to know investors, but we haven't actually raised money, and that's by choice. But when you are kind of like what Linda was talking about, there are these great networks on campus of at what is called the Venture Initiation Program. Who are thinking about doing companies, and investors will go to the as they're looking their next investment. But then do smaller investors, like angels who want to put in between $10,000 and $50,000. And then building up a reputation or VCs and for you. A lot of while you're on campus, there's a lot of, entrepreneurs who are either ahead of you or have graduated, and having them help you connect with the right investors for your product or your concept, or your advisors on campus who have a lot of connections to people who are interested in investing in early stage companies. I also, this didn't exist. It started when I was graduating, but a bunch of the VCs now have campus investment arms. What both of those are called, but a lot of the VCs have these early stage investing programs where they invest only in student-run organizations. So I think that's a great first place to start because they're looking exclusively at campuses. It's both undergrad and grad, but they're open to kind of this very early stage, not yet invested companies.
And then real quick on the investors, so we're starting to look for pre-seed funding. We obviously did a Kickstarter, which is what gave us our jump, but you just have to be really open to sharing your idea. And a lot of, pre-entrepreneurs feel like, oh, I don't want to give my idea away because it's going to get stolen. Like, then you're never going to get started if you don't tell people. So I just ask anybody who could have a potential interest in entrepreneurship or anything. So for example, I spoke to somebody I had met through school, and he's an investor, but he invests in blockchain stuff. And I was like, cool, you don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. Can you pass me on to somebody who can? And he passed me on 3 different times, like one person bumped me to another. And so now I'm finally in a conversation where this person could come on board as a mentor. So you just have to really be open to pitching yourself a bunch of times.
That's great. Thanks, Linda. Linda, perhaps staying with you for a moment, for folks that are considering their MBAs here, what was the most valuable lesson that you learned from your MBA? And was there anything you could have done to prepare for your startup before your MBA? Can you share a little bit of your ideas on those topics?
Yeah. If I had to pick one takeaway from my MBA that helped me in entrepreneurship, it would be explaining myself, which goes into pitching, but then also to explaining myself in order to help me better understand my product. I had to do that with basically all kinds of my different classmates who had crazy different work experiences. And so that was the biggest lesson that I learned from my MBA program. And it's not really like a technical skill that you learn, but I definitely, because of the critical thinking that I had to learn during case studies and during group projects, that all came down to that one lesson. And if I had to do it over, similarly, I would have decided to start from the beginning, to know that I was going to do entrepreneurship full time and to start taking those kind of classes that could have bettered helped me along this way. And so, like I said, I wanted to start with marketing, and so I kind of went that way. But again, if I had to prep myself, so I think I see a question here is like, if you have been admitted and you're prepping yourself for entrepreneurship, then start attending other pitch competitions in your city. So one thing that I always tell people is to go to Eventbrite and go to Meetup and just search entrepreneur or pitch events and just start going to them, because those startup communities, you'll see them in each, the same people will be at the same different types of events, and then that's how you start building that entrepreneurship community. So especially if you're in the city that you're going to be going to school for, like start going there, and that would be like one thing that I would have started doing earlier.
That's great. Thanks, Linda. Jory, here's one for you. For those who are already accepted and interested in starting their own business, how do you suggest looking for opportunities to learn about entrepreneurship or to learn about the industry? This one is specifically interested in clothing retail. So she doesn't have experience in the field, but how would you suggest kind of taking this pre-MBA time to really get prepared for entrepreneurship as well as learning about the industry?
That's a really good question, and very smart to be thinking about that. Just checking, is my sound okay at the moment?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, cool. I moved. So I think the most important thing, the most important way to think about this is think about what knowledge base or skill set you do not have or connections you do not have that you will need to launch your product or your concept. So, for example, we make clothing. I don't know if you're talking about producing clothing or just retailing it, but I had zero connections to factories or people who can actually help manufacture the products. So one thing I could have done was try and get an internship in production at a company and understand kind of how that works. So you can kind of understand the language, you can make some contacts, and you can understand some of the basics. Like when we were starting and people were giving us pricing on, cut and sew, I was like, yeah, that sounds right. And now I'm like embarrassed about how much we spent on some stuff at the beginning. So you can kind of give yourself a baseline just by getting in the door somewhere and hearing the language and hearing the process and what's important for them. So that would be what I would do and for sure didn't do. What we did was we ended up hiring a brilliant designer who had a lot of connections and obviously had the full language and experience to help us get to where we needed to be.
That's great. Thanks, Jory. Linda, here's a question for you. From a potential entrepreneur. She completed her MBA 3 years ago. She's thinking about entrepreneurship, but she's wondering really what you need to have in place before you fully jump into an idea. So a degree of product validation, initial potential customers, a solid business plan. What are some of the things that you would recommend having in place before you really jump in?
Yeah, like Jory mentioned earlier, like having your minimum viable product is, I think, your very first start because you're going to end up reiterating it a bunch of times. So when I first started to test my idea for Pocket Palette, I upgraded my makeup full of sandwich bag, or my sandwich bag full of makeup, and I made like a smaller pouch type of thing with different compartments. And I made like 50 of them, and I gave them to friends and family. And I said, okay, use this makeup and tell me, would you use it? How did you use it? And so I had that minimum viable product out and ready to go, and I had done several rounds of testing with it. So before, you quit your job and you do everything, like make sure that you have fully tested that idea and have some sort of idea of who, like you have to have your product tested, but then also you have to have your market ready. And I would say you don't need to, this is what holds up a lot of people when they oh, I need to have a website, or oh, I need to have a perfect logo. Like, don't spend money on that right away. Just use all the free resources and make sure that your product is purchasable and that you have your market. And any traction that you could show before you take the jump, I guess, is better too. So if you have a website, if you do end up having a website up and you have, 3,000 subscribers to your email list, like that's definitely something that's validating. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Linda. We've got time for one more question, and I'll pass this over to you, Jory. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about advice on managing the business side of your venture, so time spent on marketing yourself as a founder or the company, managing your finances, networking. Can you talk a little bit about all of those other pieces of running a successful business?
Yep, and it's definitely what takes up, unfortunately, a lot of your time, especially at the beginning. It's kind of figuring out how to actually run a company. We basically didn't, pay our taxes the first year or submit our taxes. I mean, all sorts of things we did completely wrong. I don't think we were incorporated for a while. All sorts of things that, you just don't know to do. And again, I think this is where you can get a lot of support from the network within your business school, and we just kind of didn't pay attention to a lot of the admin stuff. How to hire a bookkeeper and how to do payroll and things like that. We definitely did not do correctly until at least year two. So it takes up a lot of your time, and I think the more you can leverage other entrepreneurs who are, a year or two ahead of you, the better, because they'll have done the research on your behalf and can help you. That's how we got our accountant and how we got our lawyer and all that kind of stuff. So I think that leveraging other people's experiences is the best way to do it. The other thing I would say is, and this is kind of tangential but related, when we were starting, people kept telling us who we needed to hire. We were going to be an e-commerce company, so we needed a CTO ASAP. We still don't have the CTO. We don't need a CTO. That would have been a really big waste of our money and our time hiring that person. So it's actually really good up front for you as the founder to kind of do everything, or at least have your hand in everything, to understand where time is going. So we didn't ever think that we would need more than just our head design at the beginning, just a head designer. But she was spending so much time on production as opposed to actually designing, that we needed an assistant designer to help with the production process. But you have to actually do that and see where the time is going for you to know who to hire appropriately. Again, if we had listened to people at the beginning, we would have made all the wrong hires and wasted a whole lot of money getting some fancy CTO to work for us.
That's great. Well, thank you both, Dory, Linda, so much for sharing your time and your expertise with our audience today. It's always really refreshing to hear your stories and to learn from your experiences, so thank you. Thanks also to Kelly O'Donnell on our team for running the show here on our webinar. And I'd also like to invite you to join us for some upcoming April events. We have our Conquer Your Career Nonprofit webinar coming up April 24th, our MBA Launch On Demand available on the 2nd, and our Forte Virtual Forum on April 5th. So please do continue to join us as you explore your MBA and opportunities with your MBA and in your career. Thanks for making Forte a part of it. And Dory, Linda, thanks so much for sharing your time.